Welcome to this series of videos which support centres in training their invigilators by covering the relevant content of JCQ's Instructions for Conducting Examinations publication. In this video, we highlight the JCQ regulations for conducting on-screen tests. Please note that awarding bodies may also issue additional regulations and guidance which are specific to their qualifications. If applicable, your exams officer will highlight these additional regulations ahead of the on-screen test. A range of qualifications, including some BTECs and functional skills, are assessed via on-screen tests. These must be conducted in line with JCQ regulations and specific awarding body instructions. Invigilators must be familiar with JCQ's instructions for conducting examinations and be aware of the differences and additional requirements for conducting on-screen tests.
Candidate test password information must only be given to candidates at the time of the examination. The invigilator must check the identity of each candidate and ensure that the correct ID and password are issued. The candidate is responsible for inputting their ID and password and ensuring that the name of the test and their details are correct. If the information presented to the candidate is incorrect, they must notify the invigilator and cancel out of the examination before starting. The invigilator must give the candidate the correct ID and password in order to access their examination. If a candidate sits an examination in another candidate's name, whether or not it's intentional, this may constitute malpractice. Requirements for the supervision of candidates for test sessions, which are timetabled, will differ between tests. Your exams officer should refer to or brief you on the appropriate awarding body's subject-specific instructions. Where an on-screen test is on demand, meaning it's not held within a set timetabled session, once the candidate has completed his or her test, there's no reason for the candidate to remain within the examination room, unless it's your centre's policy that the candidates remain under supervision until the end of the session. The requirements set out in Section 10 of ICE on the use of calculators apply to all on-screen tests, unless stated otherwise in the appropriate awarding body's subject-specific instructions. Please refer to the Examination Materials video for instructions on the use of a calculator during an examination. The invigilator should check that sufficient workstations are available, including at least one replacement computer and printers where required. Your exams officer will confirm if one workstation is to be used as a control centre. This must be monitored by an invigilator or a member of the centre's IT support team. Your exams officer will also confirm that if more than one test is being conducted at the same time, whether an additional control centre is to be used. This is a requirement for AQA on-screen tests. Centres must ensure that stocks of toner, ink and paper are sufficient to meet the demands of the on-screen test where required. The JCQ unauthorised items and warning to candidates notices must be displayed in A3 format outside the examination room. Individual computers should show the time left for the test to run. If not, a clock must be visible to all candidates. Centres should take care to ensure that clock displays on individual computers are accurate and synchronised for examination purposes. The centre number, start and finish times must be displayed prominently. The arrangement of workstations and the position of the invigilator's desk must facilitate detection of any unauthorised activity by candidates, for example communication with others or use of unauthorised reference material. Each workstation must be isolated by a minimum space of 1.25 metres, measured from the nearest outer edge of one screen to the next, unless the monitors are positioned back to back or separated by dividers or protected by privacy screens. Under certain circumstances, 1.25 metres may prove to be an insufficient distance to prevent candidates seeing, intentionally or otherwise, the work of others. The principal objective is to ensure that no candidate's work can be overseen by others. Appropriate steps must be taken to ensure that this can be achieved. Candidates should normally be seated in candidate number order. However, candidates permitted extra time should be seated where they'll not be disturbed by candidates who've completed the test. Candidates must not be permitted to change seats unless asked to do so by the invigilator. If there are a large number of candidates, your exams officer will confirm the accommodation arrangements. There must be at least one invigilator for a group of 20 or fewer candidates taking on-screen tests, unless an awarding body has given permission to do otherwise, or additional invigilators are required dependent on the nature of the test and the layout of the room to ensure that all candidates are always in view. Technical help should be available throughout the tests, in case of hardware or software problems, and to assist with invigilation of the test. Invigilators must ensure that candidates are not in possession of the following items: AirPods, earphones or earbuds, iPods, mobile phones, MP3 or 4 players or similar devices, and watches. Unless permitted by the awarding body's subject-specific instructions, there must be no access to data stored on the hard drive, email, portable storage media, for example floppy disks, CDs or memory sticks, pre-prepared templates, the Internet. Centres must keep a signed record of the seating plan. During a test, workstations may be networked and it may not be possible to avoid a group of candidates having to share access to a printer. Candidates must be closely supervised to ensure they only have access to their own work. Please view our video on emergencies for details of JCQ regulations relating to the evacuation of an examination room and the close supervision of candidates. Your exams officer should confirm the following in relation to an emergency during an on-screen test: safeguarding the security of assessment content and candidate responses in case of an emergency evacuation of the assessment room. Procedures for dealing with hardware, software and communication failure, including how candidates may continue the assessment session at a different workstation or at a later time without loss of working time, and, in extreme cases, whether a paper assessment is available. Procedures for restarting an assessment after an unplanned break, including how to control the restart, reset the timing where necessary, and ensure that candidates can re-access their previous responses where this is technically feasible and permitted by the assessment regulations. Invigilators must ensure that all candidates' work is saved and help in securing this from unauthorized access. All other examination material, including copies of candidates' work, additional printouts and question papers, must be collected by the invigilator and stored in a secure place. Any common user areas accessible to candidates must be cleared of all work saved during the examination immediately after each session. Candidates' user areas must be removed at the end of the examination window or after each session if feasible. Whichever strategy is adopted, centres must ensure that the user areas of those candidates who've already sat the examination cannot be accessed by candidates who are scheduled to sit the examination in a later session within the window. Where networked stations are used, particular care should be taken to prevent work being accessible via shared folders. Invigilators should be aware that work may need to be printed off outside the time allowed for the test. Candidates must not be prevented from doing so, but must always be supervised. Scrap paper used by candidates must be collected and destroyed. Where required by an awarding body, the invigilator should check that all on-screen assessments have been uploaded to the awarding body.